So I was raised on Long Island, New York. I was raised in a large family, one of 11 children. We were homeschooled, and we attended church regularly, and were well respected in our church and in our community. So when I was 12 years old was the first time I viewed pornography, and I looked at it on my uncle's computer, and the first thing that I had seen was a BDSM website. Just for whatever reason, it just hooked me, it attached to me. I was oddly attracted to it. I couldn't really explain what it was, but I was instantly addicted. So once I had seen that kind of pornography, it just gripped me throughout my entire teenage years, and that was the type of porn I primarily sought. Even while I was viewing these images, I was going to church and becoming more and more involved in the church. By the time I was 13, I was playing violin in the worship team, and I was involved in the young boys groups. I even led a Bible study at my home. When I was 18, I got a credit card, and my very first purchase was access to a BDSM website. And what that did was open a whole new realm for me. It was a much deeper level. I went from viewing previews and samples to actually fully indulging in a very dark realm. A couple years later, I joined the Army National Guard, and I was away for 6 months of training. When I came back, got right back involved with my church, right back on the worship team, back to leading Bible studies, and all the while still addicted to this dark sexual sin. It was about that time that I really started to have an increased desire to act out on the things that I had been viewing for years. So I went to a dungeon room, and for the first time I was actually able to participate physically in the fantasies that I had been building up for years prior. Once I experienced this, it just captivated me, and I went to these dungeon rooms as much as I could afford and as frequently as I could, all throughout my 20s. So, yet at the same time, I was increasing in my church activity, and we started a young adults group at our church, and I was asked to become the leader of the worship team in the young adults group. The only way I could function in my church was I embraced this idea that God's grace was going to cover this whole second lifestyle of sin that I had. And it was just so far from the truth. I honestly just thought that at least I knew I was going to heaven, and how I lived my life was not really going to affect that God's grace got me to heaven, and it would forgive all my sins. When I was 26, I got deployed to Afghanistan. And when I came back from that deployment, once again, I was back into my double lifestyle, attending the church and involved with my sexual sin. Not long after I came home from Afghanistan, I met this beautiful, pure, innocent girl from our church. And about 6 months into that relationship, she discovered an email that I had sent to one of these dungeon facilities, describing in explicit detail everything that I wanted done at the facility. And she was shocked. And I knew at that point that there was going to be a big change. Something was going to happen. That I had to get rid of this sin once and for all. She told me that I needed to bring this to light and talk to my pastor. When I sat with my pastor, he said 3 things I needed to do was quit my job. I had to end my relationship with my girlfriend, and I needed to go to Pure Life Ministries in Kentucky. When I arrived at Pure Life Ministries, within probably the first week of being here, I got very sick. When I look back on it, it was probably the most sick I've maybe ever been in my life. I remember lying in bed in the labs, and I couldn't move without having kind of excruciating pain throughout my whole body. I remember at one point I couldn't move my foot without it just shooting pain throughout my whole body. And I remember just unable to explain what was going on. I didn't really actually feel sick other than this overwhelming, it was like an oppression or a demonic attack, because I didn't have like a fever. I didn't feel like I could throw up. I was just couldn't move. And I just remember laying there and being bombarded with just intense, like spiritual warfare. It was like the devil was doing everything he possibly could to keep a hold of my soul. And it was like there was a battle going on. And it was like, you sure you want to do this? You sure you want to do this? And at one point I had a dream. And in this dream, I was actually in a cage, in a dungeon. And it was some demonic force was walking around, and he clearly said to me, "Luke, you have a lifetime membership to this." And I remember waking up and saying, "Absolutely not. There's no way. No way. I'm not going to do that." I was able to muster up enough strength to go to a prayer group, and I just kept asking for the Lord to just break me and show me what was going on here, and just to free me from this constant attack. I went to the bathroom and finally felt like I could throw up. I felt, at least maybe if I could vomit, this would feel better and I could get over whatever this is. But I hadn't eaten or drank anything for days, so I was dry heaving about 6 or 7 times until finally a drop of blood came out. And it was like the Lord spoke to me in that moment and said, "It's only by my blood that you're going to get through this." And that just started the breaking down process of my life. The Lord revealed to me that really my entire life, everything that I had done in the church, my career, the military, my deployment, everything that I had done was all built on self-righteousness and pride. And he clearly showed me that my spiritual bank account was empty and that he barely knew me. At that point, I was really just crying out for salvation. I knew this problem was a lot bigger than what I originally thought it was. I would cry out for weeks, just asking for the Lord to break me, and to break my pride, because I knew that if I had really built my entire life on pride and my own self-righteousness, that was going to require just some massive breaking down. He was faithful, and he did. And one night while we were watching a Jackie Pullinger video on how she was dealing with the addicts in, I believe it was Hong Kong, I somehow related to what these guys were going through. And I was like, yes, I can understand that addiction, because that's what I felt like I had, that bondage to my sin. And although they were dealing with hardcore drugs,
and I was dealing with pornography and a whole sexual lifestyle, I felt like there was an attachment, a similar kind of addiction. And when she would pray for these guys and their testimony was that God set them free, it was like the Lord was able to show me that, yes, I can set you free from this. And when I went down to the altar that night, I felt like the Lord had touched me and healed me and set me free from that bondage. The chains at that point really had been broken. God just came through and proved himself to be so much more powerful than the enemy. But what I really had to do through that time was just that crying out to the Lord and asking for him to break me and meet me. And it didn't come quickly. It took months of daily crying out to the Lord. And he met me.
There was a time that grace meant nothing to me. And now when I think of the Lord's grace and his love towards me, I just think of how he could embrace me, he could love me, protect me. And now I have a relationship with the Lord that is completely different than anything I've ever had in the past.